G'day everybody. Well, since so many people have been asking me about it, I figured I might as well do a bit of a viewer request and actually show you how I build my air raid sirens and how you can do it yourselves. I'm going to look over the materials I use, how I put them together, the motors I use, and also how to tune your siren in order to get the best sound output. Now, the materials I use is plywood, and I recommend you do it yourselves if you do choose to build one. Don't use any hard materials like acrylic or just sheet pine, because pine especially has the tendency to shatter if it's stressed too much, and it will break along its grain, and it's also a hell of a lot harder to work with. So that's why plywood's good, is because it's cross-laminated, so this grain's going that way, the grain underneath will be going that way, and because it's like that, it's got double the amount of strength of just regular timber. Also recommend getting yourselves one of these. It's a compass, for those who don't know. It's called a compass, not the thing you use to work out your north and south, but this is for drawing circles and also working out your dead center of a circle. Depending on how big you want your siren rotor to be, you basically get your work out your diameter first of how big you want your siren rotor, divide it by 2, and then that half number you set your compass to measure that length, and then when you draw your circle, you just put one end down on the piece of wood and go around like that sort of thing, and that center point where you pressed it in, that's your dead center of your base plate, and that outer edge is where you'll cut it out. Now, what I like to do is, before I even cut it out, once I've got it drawn down, is I actually drill through that little center punched hole, and that way I've got my center of the plate worked out and ready to go for when I need to enlarge it to fit it on a motor shaft, or drill it out to fit a pulley or something in, or whatever else. But then once I've done it, I cut it out with a jigsaw. You can use a bandsaw as well if you've got one, but I don't, so I use the old trusty Aldi jigsaw and just cut it out, and job done. Once I've got it out, then I can start to drill that hole out larger to get it to fit on my motor shaft. Where's my hanky? I just got to stop for a nose blow a second. Alrighty, I'm back. Poor old hanky copped it. I won't give you the gory details, but the major disadvantage of a head cold, I will tell you now, it's not nice. But anyway, once you got your plate cut out, put on the shaft, run your angle grinder over the outer edge of it very carefully like a lathe, and you can actually smoothen it out and get it dead round. If you've got a wood turning lathe, you can use that as well. In fact, I do recommend you use a wood turning lathe. It will give you a nicer finish. But if you don't have a wood turning lathe, use an angle grinder with a sanding disc on it, a bit like that. Those work the best for it, and they'll give you a nice smooth clean finish. Then once you've done that, you first decide how many ports you want, cut out your ports and get them ready, and then what you do is you put a tape measure around the outside of your base plate, measure your circumference, type into your calculator how many, basically put that number in, then divide it by your number of ports, and that should give you spacing between your ports. Preferably go for the middle of your port to the middle of that one, but you can also go from, say, that edge there, the front edge, to the front edge of your next one. That will also work. But once you've done that, put them on, glue them down first, then cut out and glue your top ring on. That's also basic. Let the glue set for about 5 minutes, depending on what type of glue you use. And then what I like to do is put a screw through each of the ports. That way I'll bind it together and make it nice and strong. Of course, plywood will already have a good amount of strength in it, but the screw will just stop the ports trying to basically pull out, or the vanes try and pull out under the extreme stresses that this thing will be subjected to at the high speeds. You can also add little aluminium vanes if you want. Those are just tacked on with just a bit of glue and some tacks. That holds alright, and they also help channel air flow through. So the more air you get through your siren, the more sound you'll get out of it. So Once you've done that, put the whole lot back onto your motor shaft, spin it up at a relatively low speed, and run your angle grinder over it, and basically just smooth off the outer edge until it comes nice and round. Again, you can do that in a wood lathe if you've got one. I wouldn't recommend a wood lathe too much because they do have a tendency to actually rip material off, and they will give you a rougher finish. But you can even do it with a bit of sandpaper as well. Then you do exactly the same with your stator. Measure your circumference and mark it out, and then you can either cut your ports in if it's a piece of pipe. That's actually a bit of steel pipe. This one's got to be redone as well because the stator's loose on it. I've got to work out a sturdier way of fixing it. But you just cut them out. Make sure you got exactly the same number of ports in your stator as well as in your siren, because if you got, say, 7 in here and 6 in here, you'll get a really shit sound from it. It will not work the way you intend it to. But if you do make a wooden a plywood stator as well, like this one's all plywood, set the base plate, the stator base plate I mean. Basically you just cut out your ring, give a bit of space like I've done there, so you can actually give yourself a bit of area to play with. And then what I like to do is screw this down first, make sure your bottom part's not touching your rotor, and then I glue these in as close as possible to my rotor, and that way once I've got it to the point where none of them are touching, I can even fill in later on like I've done here and close the tolerance even more. Then once I've got my rotor on, I can add weight to it if I want as well. You can do that as well, but make sure you put exactly the same amount of weight on each space that you do, because otherwise you'll have balance issues and you will have to take the rotor off again and rebalance it, and it may be a little bit hard if you've glued it to the shaft. But again, rotor vanes as well in there, or fins to help with airflow, and the sky's the limit. Again, you can use as many ports as you want on these. Like that one there, I actually bug it up. I put 11 ports on the outside and 12 on there. It doesn't affect the sound too much, but it's not as good as I was hoping it would be. But yeah, you got 6 ports there, as you can see, and then the 8 to 12, which you saw the video on yesterday. Now the motors you can use. You can pretty much use any type of motor you want, depending on how fast your siren is going to go. We have 50 Hz here in Australia, so our high speed motors are 2800 RPM. We don't have the luxury that you good guys over in America have, which is 3500 RPMs, I believe, on 60 Hz. So your 12-port sirens actually sound like a... your 10-port sirens sound like a 12-port siren does here on 2800. So our sirens run a bit slower than yours does. But again, the way we get our higher tones is we just put 2 more ports in. So we have 14-port sirens if we want a higher tone sort of thing. So that's how we compensate. But that's I prefer induction motors, high-speed ones. That's a Sparpool pump motor. I just took the pump assembly off and put my siren, rotor and stator assembly on the end. It doesn't have a flange, but I was able to sort of cannibalise the end bell on the motor to work as a bit of a flange, and that does the job just fine. I've even made up a little stand for it as well, which you can do, and you just mount your motor to it, and that way it'll hold it upright. You can mount it down, sideways, you can mount it whichever way you want, but just be aware if you do go putting pressure on the stator, and if it is a flexible material, it will bend and you will end up having issues with it. But you can use universal motors as well, which is basically you can get really high speeds with these, but do be careful you don't overspeed your rotor because it will blow up. That's a universal washing machine motor. Running that little 6-port, they can get up to 6,000 revs, no problem. I'm running out of camera memory here, so this is going to be kind of quick, but that does just fine for higher speeds. Washing machine motors, and the way I get my 3500 RPM is via a big DC treadmill motor, which is this here. It's got a big flywheel on it, and it helps with the wind down, and it just gives a ton of speed from it. You can fit intakes to your sirens as well, and I do recommend doing it. You don't have to, but it will improve the sound because it will silence the rushing noise and help with basically it'll just help with the airflow, and it will bring out the actual tone of your siren. That one I modelled on a ventilation diffuser or register, so that's why it sort of looks like that. But that also acts as a bit of a finger guard as well, lets the air in without people sticking their hands in it. But you can just put a PVC tube on it, that will work as well, like I did with this one here. That just sits on the top and does the same job, just lets the air in and out. You can also build casings as well, like I did for this one here. You can build them whichever shape you want. That was just sort of a bit of everything really. Will end up as a lampshade at some point, I can guarantee, but that's just a 5-gallon drum with the bottom end cut off and the vent cap glued on the top, and then I've got the flutes and things to help direct the sound out. A bit of reinforcing for those, that holds them all together, and that does the job just fine. But make sure your casing fits over your siren, because that didn't the first time. Now just set this down and grind out that whole edge to get it round enough to fit that on. But that's the basics of how I do it. Again, you can choose your port ratios. You can use how many ports you want, or as little ports as you want. It's all up to what your siren sounds like. Again, remember your health and safety around tools and things, and for God's sakes, get yourselves one of these if you're going to do it, because these will make your life so much easier. They can, not only will they give you a dead round circle to follow by with your jigsaw, but they'll also give you the centre of your circle. So get one of these, they're dirt cheap. So yeah, pretty much covered everything. I apologise if I've left anything out, and do feel free to leave any comments and questions if you've got any. I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for watching, and stay tuned for some more stuff at some point.